What happens when a franchise that promised its fan base, "This is our year," suddenly transforms into the NHL's biggest garage sale, offering everything from role players to potentially their captain for the right price? The Vancouver Canucks aren't just exploring trade options, they're conducting an organizational autopsy while the patient is still breathing. And the prognosis? It's either brilliant strategic surgery or catastrophic malpractice, depending on whether you believe Jim Rutherford is a genius or a madman with a scalpel. Let's start with the player who's turned from depth acquisition into the NHL's most coveted rental property, Kiefer Sherwood. The 30-year-old winger is leading Vancouver with 12 goals while earning a laughable $1.5 million, the kind of value proposition that makes general managers salivate like Pavlov's dogs hearing a dinner bell. But here's where this gets absolutely delicious from a market dynamics perspective. Sherwood isn't just attracting casual interest. According to Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman, powerhouses like Minnesota, Boston, and Philadelphia have already circled the wagons. James Murphy's NHL sources add the Islanders, Sabres, and Red Wings to the mix. That's 6 teams we know about. Imagine the silent bidders working back channels, waiting to strike when the moment's right. TSN's Chris Johnston dropped a fascinating wrinkle into this narrative. Despite Rutherford's well-documented history of pulling triggers early, patience might actually serve Vancouver better this time. Why? Because if Sherwood maintains his current trajectory through February, he could command a first-round pick. The kind of asset that can fundamentally alter a franchise's trajectory. Think about the absurdity of that statement for a moment. A 30-year-old journeyman who's never been considered elite could fetch premium draft capital simply because he's playing the best hockey of his career at precisely the right moment. That's not luck. That's the NHL trade market operating exactly as designed, rewarding teams that identify value before it becomes obvious to everyone else. The philosophical question Johnston raises cuts to the heart of Vancouver's identity crisis. Does Rutherford want a first-round pick that won't help for 3 years, or an NHL-ready prospect who can contribute immediately? That decision reveals whether the Canucks are rebuilding or retooling. And there's a universe of difference between those two approaches. Garland's curious case. When extended players become trade bait, Connor Garland's name appearing in trade discussions alongside Sherwood should send alarm bells screaming through Rogers Arena. Unlike Sherwood, Garland isn't a rental. He's signed through a 6-year extension beginning next July. This isn't deadline maneuvering. This is potential core reconstruction. Murphy's reporting suggests Garland might not actually be available, which raises a critical question. Why is his name even in these conversations? There are 2 possibilities, and neither is particularly comforting for Canucks fans. First, management might be testing the market, keeping all options open even without immediate trade intentions. This is standard due diligence. Smart organizations always know their players' market value. Second, other teams might be proactively inquiring about players beyond obvious rentals, hoping to catch Vancouver in a vulnerable selling mood. The distinction matters enormously. Trading pending UFAs is standard business. You're converting expiring assets into future value. Trading a player with 6 years of control signals something far more dramatic, a fundamental reassessment of your competitive timeline and roster philosophy. If Garland genuinely becomes available, it confirms that Vancouver's evaluation extends beyond simple deadline transactions into wholesale roster reimagining. That's when fans should legitimately question whether management still believes in this core or has already mentally moved on to the next iteration. The Roenick situation, contractual handcuffs and market realities. Philip Roenick's name surfacing in trade speculation represents the most logistically complicated scenario imaginable. The 28-year-old defenseman carries a $7.25 million cap hit through 6 more seasons with a full, no-movement clause, contractual protections that essentially make him untradeable unless he specifically requests it. Stefan Rossner's suggestion that Roenick would fit beautifully on the Islanders' blue line alongside Matthew Schaefer is tactically sound. The pairing would provide legitimate top-4 capabilities, but tactical fit doesn't overcome contractual reality. Unless Roenick privately requests a trade, and there's zero indication of that. This remains firmly in fantasy territory. However, the mere fact that teams are reportedly inquiring about a player with Ronnick's contract structure reveals something crucial about the current market. The defenseman supply is absolutely barren. Teams are so desperate for blue line upgrades that they're willing to explore scenarios that border on logistically impossible. This should embolden Rutherford tremendously. If teams are inquiring about players with full no-movement clauses and massive cap hits, imagine what they'll pay for actually available defensive assets. The desperation is palpable, and smart sellers exploit desperation ruthlessly. The Hughes nuclear option, unthinkable or inevitable. And now we arrive at the conversation that should have every Canucks fan simultaneously furious and terrified. Quinn Hughes' future in Vancouver. Let's establish facts before diving into the speculation tornado. Hughes is 26 years old, the team's captain, a Norris Trophy finalist, and signed through 2026 to 27. He hasn't requested a trade. He's not available. But the mere fact that his name is circulating reveals how quickly narratives spiral when a team signals any willingness to sell. Frank Saravalli suggested Philadelphia as a potential destination, reuniting Hughes with former coach Rick Tocchet. The storyline writes itself. Star player follows beloved coach, gets fresh start, competes for championships. It's happened before, it'll happen again. Even more intriguing is the persistent speculation linking Hughes to New Jersey, where he'd join brothers Jack and Luke in a historic family reunion. From New Jersey's perspective, it's a marketing dream. From Vancouver's perspective, it's an organizational nightmare that would haunt them for decades. Flyers beat writer Kevin Kerr's attempted damage control, claiming he hasn't heard any indication Philadelphia would pursue Hughes. But he crucially added that he wouldn't rule out management attempting to acquire a player who could accelerate their rebuild. Translation: if Hughes becomes available, every team with assets and ambition will be making calls. Here's the uncomfortable truth Canucks fans must confront. Hughes becomes extension eligible next summer. If he indicates through his agent, through subtle comments, through body language that he's not interested in committing long-term to Vancouver's rebuild, Rutherford faces an impossible decision. Do you keep Hughes and risk losing him for nothing in free agency? Or do you trade him now when his value is astronomical and kickstart a complete organizational overhaul? The parallels to other franchise-altering trades are impossible to ignore. Colorado trading Matt Duchene, Ottawa moving Erik Karlsson, Calgary shipping Matthew Tkachuk. In each case, management read the writing on the wall and decided maximizing return was preferable to watching a superstar walk away for nothing. Rutherford's track record: genius or reckless gambler? Jim Rutherford's reputation demands examination. This is a man who won Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh through aggressive, sometimes controversial roster moves. He's never feared making unpopular decisions if he believes they improve his team. He's traded fan favorites, moved franchise icons, and completely overhauled rosters in pursuit of championships. But here's the critical question. Is Rutherford's aggressive approach the right fit for Vancouver's current situation? His Pittsburgh track record involved adding pieces to championship-caliber teams, not dismantling struggling organizations. His brief Carolina tenure ended controversially. His Vancouver time has featured bold moves, some successful, others questionable. The concern should be that Rutherford might overestimate the returns he can command, leading to either unrealistic asking prices that prevent deals from materializing or impulsive moves that undervalue what Vancouver surrenders. The line between aggressive and reckless is razor thin, and Rutherford has occasionally crossed it. Market context: perfect storm or saturated supply. Understanding the broader trade market context is essential to predicting Vancouver's next moves. Multiple contending teams desperately need depth scoring, physical wingers, and defensive upgrades. The supply of quality rental players is limited. The demand is astronomical. This creates the perfect storm for sellers like Vancouver to maximize returns. However, there's a critical catch. If multiple sellers flood the market simultaneously, Calgary, Seattle, Anaheim also making players available, prices could crater dramatically. Timing becomes everything. Move too early, and you might miss better offers that develop closer to the deadline. Wait too long, and the market might be saturated with similar players, destroying your leverage. This is where Rutherford's decades of experience should prove invaluable. He understands the psychology of desperate general managers, the pressure owners apply to go for it, and the premium teams will pay for perceived difference makers. If he plays this correctly, Vancouver could stockpile assets that accelerate their rebuild by years. The emotional toll. What this means for Vancouver's identity beyond the strategic calculations and asset management discussions lies a more fundamental question. What does this approach do to the franchise's identity and fan trust? The Canucks currently sit in playoff contention, making the decision to potentially sell assets feel premature and defeatist. Why abandon a season that's still salvageable? The counterargument requires uncomfortable honesty. Are the Canucks legitimate Stanley Cup contenders, or are they a bubble team that might sneak into the playoffs only to exit quickly? Management appears to have answered that question internally, and their answer is driving these trade discussions. This is where organizational vision either builds trust or destroys it completely. If Vancouver trades Sherwood for first-round pick and uses that asset to acquire a young player who contributes for years, fans will eventually appreciate the foresight. If they trade him for futures that never materialize while the team misses the playoffs anyway, the criticism will be deafening and entirely justified. The emotional investment fans make in players like Sherwood, who've exceeded expectations and embodied the grittiness fans love, makes these transactions personally painful. It's not just about hockey strategy, it's about connection, loyalty, and the stories we tell ourselves about our teams. For scenarios, how this could unfold as we approach the March 7th trade deadline, several distinct scenarios could unfold. Scenario 1. The patient approach the Canucks wait until late February or early March, allowing Sherwood's value to peak as contenders become desperate. They extract maximum value, potentially that first-round pick, and convert expiring assets into future building blocks. Scenario 2. The early strike, Rutherford reverts to his aggressive tendencies, making moves in January or early February to provide certainty and allow the organization to pivot toward next season's planning immediately. Scenario 3. The surprise hold Vancouver's evaluation concludes that their playoff chances remain legitimate and they hold onto their pending UF ace, gambling on a postseason run and risking losing assets for nothing if they walk in free agency. Scenario 4. The expanded sale trade discussions extend beyond obvious rentals like Sherwood to include players like Garland, signaling a more comprehensive roster reconstruction than initially anticipated. Each scenario carries distinct implications for the franchise's short-term competitiveness and long-term trajectory. The decisions made over the next 2 months will define Vancouver's direction for years to come. The verdict: strategic brilliance or organizational panic. The Vancouver Canucks stand at a crossroads that will define their franchise for the next decade. The willingness to entertain offers for veteran players, particularly pending UFAs like Kiefer Sherwood, represents either shrewd asset management or premature abandonment of playoff aspirations, depending entirely on your perspective and management's accuracy in evaluating their true competitive position. What's undeniable is that the trade market for Vancouver's assets is robust and growing. Sherwood's combination of production, affordability, and physicality makes him arguably the most attractive rental forward potentially available. The interest from multiple contenders creates the competitive bidding environment that maximizes return. The speculation surrounding players like Garland, and especially Quinn Hughes, reveals how quickly narratives spiral once a team signals any willingness to sell. While Hughes' trade rumors remain firmly in fantasy territory, their mere existence demonstrates the reputational consequences of opening trade discussions. For Canucks fans, the coming weeks will test patience, faith in management, and emotional resilience. Watching beloved players potentially depart is never easy, even when the strategic logic is sound. The ultimate judgment on these decisions won't come for months or even years, when we can evaluate whether the assets acquired justified the assets surrendered. One thing is certain. The NHL trade market just got significantly more interesting, and Vancouver sits at the center of the storm, either orchestrating a masterpiece of asset management or conducting a slow-motion organizational implosion. What's your take on Vancouver's approach? Are they making the smart, difficult decisions that build long-term success, or are they abandoning a season that still holds legitimate playoff promise? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear whether you think Rutherford is a genius or gambling with the franchise's future. And if you're as captivated by this unfolding drama as I am, smash that like button so we can keep delivering the in-depth analysis that cuts through the noise and gets to the truth.